Well, good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to another of our Wednesday webinars. Got a great webinar planned for you today. Got a noted author, Jim Blasingame, in his new book, who's going to be joining us live. You might see him up there in the right-hand corner, joining us live from Florence, Alabama. Before we introduce Jim and get on with the show, a little bit about the SBDC and a little bit about your webinar experience today. I'm Kelly Bearden. I'm the director of the CSU Bakersfield Small Business Development Center, and we're part of 1,000 small business development centers across the country. The webinar series, and like all of our programs at the SBDC, are programmed in large part by the U.S. Small Business Administration. So here in Kern County, where we're located, we're part of the Central California Regional SBDC network, which comprises of 14 counties in Central California, from the Pacific Ocean to the Nevada border, and up to the top of Mono County to the far south of Kern County. These 14 counties represent one of the 6 regional networks in California. So a little bit about our webinar interaction for today. We encourage you to please ask questions. The questions will be fielded at the end of the presentation, but we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. We know you'll have some. All of our attendees today are muted, so you are muted, but you can participate by doing the questions and by completing the survey after the webinar. By completing the survey, you'll get an entry to win a signed copy of the 3rd ingredient that we'll be discussing today. And any other handouts or materials, please mention that on the survey as well, because we really value your survey and your information. So please take the time to complete that and enter to win a signed book from Jim. Some other webinar tips. We do have a mobile application that's available. You do need to download the Zoom software for the best possible experience. Sometimes we do interactive polls. We're not going to do one today, but we do have plenty of time for questions and answers, and we really value your questions. So think of some good ones, and let's stump Jim today, huh? So a little bit about what the SBDC does. We provide high quality, no cost, confidential, one-on-one consulting, and we do training for small business owners, and we do it on a variety of different topics and mediums. I can honestly say this is one of our first training topics that we've ever had on digital ethics and the difference between analog and digital ethics. So I'm excited. I know you are too. So we do a number of different presentations. We do everything from webinars to business workshops and seminars, full-day conferences, etc., and in-depth classes. So check our website. We have a new website, CSUBSBDC.com. Check it out. You can sign up here and sign up for future webinars. And without any further ado, let me introduce our presenter for today. Our presenter, and before I introduce Jim, I just want to mention I am joined today here at Webinar Central with one of our lead business consultants, Tom Weir, and also our producer, Elizabeth Hamlin. And you'll hear from them in a little bit as well. So on with the show, and it's a pleasure to introduce Jim Blasingame. Jim, you might have known, joined us in April for his award-winning book, The Age of the Customer. He's back now with his award-winning book on the 3rd ingredient, and this book has already garnered 5 international awards for the book cover and interior page design. Jim's books have sold over 250,000 copies worldwide. Jim is a world-class entrepreneur. He does a variety of different programs, including his award-winning radio show, The Small Business Advocate. He's been syndicated since 1997. You can read him in Forbes.com and NASDAQ.com, among other things. Jim, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Looking forward to learning more about digital ethics. So, Jim, take it away.
Thank you, Kelly, very much. I appreciate it very much. And let me get the things going here, and we'll. There we go. How's that sound? Is that good? Okay, so here we go. And by the way, before I go any further, I want to say that how much I admire and appreciate the good work that the SBDC is doing. And so you guys at Bakersfield SBDC there in California, thank you for the great work you're doing. Kelly, Tom, Elizabeth, all the folks there. I love SBDCs, and if you're listening right now to their program, regardless of who's here giving the program, you're a member of an elite group, small business owners who are listening out there, and those of you who want to be. The reason you're in an elite group is because you want to get better. You're taking the time to learn from people who may have gone before you a little bit. And you can see my white hair. You can tell that I've gone before most of you. So the fact that you're showing up today and taking your time, believe it or not, that puts you in an elite group, and that's the reason I'm proud of you. All right, let's go to work. I want to talk about the journey of analog ethics into the world of digital fear and greed. You probably never heard that term, analog ethics, before, because I coined the term, believe it or not. So that's the reason why Kelly was saying this is something you're gonna learn some things today that not too many other people know about. All right, so let's talk about the journey of analog ethics. The analog age, many of you have heard of the analog age. It's 10,000 years old. It began in 8102 BC. That's the year that I say that the analog age was born. That's the story I'm sticking to. It's been going on for about 10,000 years. So in the analog age, everything was physical, chemical, right? Including you and me. Every human ever born, every one of us, 100% analog, always have been, always will be. And during that 10,000 years, the two forces that really have propelled us to where we are today, the two fundamental forces are fear and greed. Most of you know all about that, right? And most of the time, fear and greed, we get the good sides of fear and greed, right? But sometimes we don't, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So during that 10,000 years, we created all these wonderful analog things, right? Look at all these things we created. All that's analog right there. And we did it with leverage, analog leverage, muscle power and horsepower and tractor power and all that. We created all this new analog leverage. Leverage is an important word to remember. Analog leverage, that's what we've had for 10,000 years. And we measured that leverage in terms of power and also in terms of speed, as you see there. Along the way, in order to maintain order, because fear and greed didn't always behave itself right, we had to create something else. We had to create what I call passive forces to push, to hold fear and greed in what I call equilibrium. And those passive forces are ethics. Now, what kind of ethics do you have in the analog age? Of course, you have analog ethics. That's a really important term to remember. Write that down. That's going to be on the test. All right. So in the last 10,000 years, we created a catalog of analog ethics. Lots of different things, right? The Magna Carta, the Golden Rule, the Scouts Pledge, the Ten Commandments, the Constitution. Those are all examples of analog ethics. What's the definition of ethics? This is my favorite by my friend Lynn Morell in his book, In Search of Ethics. He said ethics is devotion to the unenforceable. I know you're going to want to write that down. Isn't that beautiful? Ethics is devotion to the unenforceable. I'd like for you to write that down and just think about that. Remember that for maybe the rest of your life. I've never forgotten it. So ethics is trust. Trust is what we expect from each other. Ethics are values. Values are what we require of ourselves. And ideals are what we get when we put those two together. That's how ethics works in our lives. So here's my question. Are you an ethical person? Of course you are. And you know, I'm an ethical person because they invited you to come today. You said you were going to show up, and you did. I promised to be here. Here I am. We're ethical people. We do what we say we're going to do. When you drove to work today, did you stay on your side of the road? Of course you did. That's an ethical thing to do. When somebody came at you on the other side of the road, you expected them to stay on their side. This is how the world works, ethics. And you're an ethical person. We'll talk about that a little bit in a minute. So we all practice the ethics every day, and we typically do it very well. But have you ever wondered why we don't think much about ethics? Well, it's because we've been doing it for 10,000 years. You don't have to think about ethics. You didn't have to think about staying on your side of the road. I didn't have to Elizabeth didn't have to call me this morning and say, hey, Jim, now you promised to be here. Are you really going to be here? She trusted me because she knew I was an ethical person. And because of all that, because we've been doing it so long, it's so much a part ingrained in us. Ethics, analog ethics is so much ingrained in us that we just don't think about it very much. And that's becoming an issue in the digital age. So in all this time, 10,000 years, we created all this stuff on this foundation of ethical things. Look at the rocks down there. That's a foundation for all the things that we built over the last 10,000 years. But ethics is really not in a static rock wall. Ethics moves. Ethics must move. Analog ethics moves at the same speed as the analog leverage. That's going to be on the test. Analog ethics moves at the same speed as the analog leverage. That's a really important point to remember. Ethics, my friends, must move at the same speed as the leverage. I bet you never thought about that before. Well, you're going to have to start thinking about it as we move into the digital age. So here we are, 10,000 years of analog ethics on this foundation. God is in his heaven and all is right with the world. And then something happened that's never happened before in 10,000 years of the marketplace. A once in a 10 millennia paradigm shift. The digital leverage that we've created is now replacing analog leverage. You got that right. You're seeing this happening all the time. And it's scaring the heck out of a lot of people. So why is digital leverage creating so much anxiety? Well, it's because we took 10,000 years to go from mammoth to mainframe, but only a couple of generations to go from mainframe to mobile. That's a compression of time that we've never seen before. We've had cataclysmic change happen to us in a couple of generations when we took 10,000 years for all the changes before. This is why we've got so much anxiety. So I'm telling you this, so I want you to not be so, don't feel bad if you don't understand why you're feeling anxious. Don't feel bad about that. You've got a right to feel that way. The world, the change that we're experiencing in our world is compressing in ways that's never happened before. And as an analog human, you have a right to feel a little bit anxious. So we're struggling with the disconnect between the digital leverage reality that we're coming into, that we're increasingly going into, and our analog ethical expectations. The analog ethical baggage, so to speak, that we brought with us after 10,000 years, we're having trouble. We're struggling with the disconnect between where we're going and where we've been. So let's talk about what digital leverage. What do we know about it? Well, it's exciting. It's fun. It's sexy, right? It's powerful. It's great opportunity. I make a living with digital leverage. Many of you probably do too. It's very fast. We know that, right? How fast is it? Gigahertz. Not RPMs, not miles per hour, gigahertz. That's 1 billion bits per second. Think about that. Moving, billion bits per second, moving at 186,000 miles per second. Pretty fast, right? What else do we know about digital leverage? It's disruptive. We know it's seductive and addictive. It can be scary, a little creepy sometimes too, right? What about ethics? What about digital ethics? What do you know about digital ethics? Well, what does it look like? Do you know what digital ethics looks like? It might look like this. How fast does digital ethics have to go? Well, we already know how fast analog ethics goes. Analog ethics must move at the same speed as the leverage. So does digital ethics. That's a really important thing to remember as we move forward, as you try to resolve some of the anxiety of the new age. Digital ethics has to move at the same speed as the leverage. Digital ethics must move at the same speed as a digital leverage. I'm repeating that for a reason. We've got to learn how to install trust on a 9 gigahertz nitrogen cooled 28 core processor. Any of you guys know how to do that? We're still working on that, aren't we? So this is the world we've come from, the analog age. All the things we created on that foundation. This is what we have now, the digital age on top of analog ethics. So here's my question. Does that look like it's going to work? What's wrong with that picture? The ethics that got us here can't move fast enough to get us where we're going. Now, I didn't say trust wasn't going to be important in the future. Quite the opposite. And we'll talk about that in a minute. I'm just saying that the way we know about it, the way we have had it, the way we've had ethics, the way we've used it, is not going to get us where we have to go with our ethics as we move into the digital age. We've got to find a way to mount trust on a 9 gigahertz nitrogen-cooled 28-core processor. So who's going to create this digital ethics? Well, Kathy O'Neill wrote a book called Weapons of Mass Destruction. She's a quant. You know what a quant is? Very smart mathematical person. Look it up. She says for all their advantages, computers still struggle mightily with concepts. Very important thing to remember. Computers are not going to resolve our digital ethical issues. They're not going to do it. How about Amazon? Anybody think Jeff Bezos is going to solve this? He tells his management, do whatever it takes. I don't care about the cost. That's a quote from him. Does that sound like an ethical statement? He says, I don't care about bookstores or books. I just want to sell people everything they need and collect their information in the process. He told somebody, I know that. That's a quote from him that he told to a person that I know. Think about that. I just want your stuff. Does that sound ethical? Venture capital, they say they want to gain an advantage over mere humans with their AI. Does that sound like they're thinking about ethics? Who's going to create digital ethics? You know what, folks? It's going to be you and me. The people who created analog ethics, we're going to have to create digital ethics. It's left up to us. But we have a problem. Just as a fish doesn't know he lives in water until he finds himself in another dimension, you and I are finding ourselves increasingly in another dimension, a digital dimension almost devoid of ethics. And we're feeling anxious and unsettled about it. When I talk to audiences around the country and I ask them, how are you feeling? Are you feeling anxious and unsettled about technology today? 100% raise their hands immediately. A lot of people are. You probably are too. It's understandable. So how are your ethics doing? How's your digital ethics as you wander around in this new dimension? Are you a digitally ethical person? We know you're an analog ethical person, but are you a digital ethical person? Well, let me tell you a story. The title of the story is, What's More Dangerous Than an Algorithm or a Robot? So you're sitting in your favorite alfresco cafe, and you got your cappuccino there, and you got your smartphone there, and you're just relaxing, cooling your heels, and on that smartphone, you've just discovered the coolest, sexiest, most awesome app you've ever seen in your life. And you're just about to push the button on that phone, to download that app, and someone walks up to you and says, excuse me, and you look up, and you're a little irritated because they've interrupted you, and this person says, you know Kelly Bearden, right? And so you say, yes, I do. And this person says, well, I would like to contact him. I understand you have his contact information. Would you give it to me? Now, freeze frame. Are you going to give this person you don't know the contact information of someone you know very well? Are you? Is Kelly, what would Kelly expect you to do? Would Kelly say, sure, they'll give out my information to everybody, right? Would he expect that? I don't think so. I don't think you'd give it to this person because you don't know that person. And that would be an unethical thing to do, wouldn't it? All right. So then you say to this person, you say, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't help you. I don't know this person. Leave your card with me. I'll give it to Kelly next time I see him, and he can contact you if he wants to. That's probably what you would do. And then you turn to your phone and you hit that little red circle right there and download this cool, sexy, awesome app. Even though, in this language you see on the screen, that's actual language that I found on an app that I was considering for my phone. That's the real language. Allow this app to access photo, media, contact, location, and other files on your device. In other words, if you download my free app, I'm going to come get all your stuff. Now, you just told that guy to take a hike. And then you turned around and you hit that button and you gave some app developer like the professor in California, in England, the Facebook, remember the Analytica, the Cambridge Analytica thing? You just gave a guy just like him all your contact information, Kelly's and mine, and hundreds, thousands, who knows how many people you're in your contact file. You just gave that away by pushing that app. How many times have you already done that? So you passed the analog ethics test, and within seconds, you failed the digital ethics test. And I bet until just now, you hadn't even thought about that. So my question now, back to the original question, what's more dangerous than an algorithm or a robot? When I ask people, are you worried about algorithms? They raise their hand. AI, they raise their hand. Robots, they raise their hand. But I'm telling you, long before a robot takes us down, you and I will do it by pushing an enter key. That's the potential that digital leverage has, that you and I have in our hands. So what does digital ethics look and sound like? I'm going to give you a little bit of a tip. I want you to remember this. Remember that app language I told you about? That came up on my screen, and I said basically, I thought, just because I can doesn't mean that I should. I want you to remember that. Write that down. Just because I can doesn't mean that I should. This is the approach we're going to have to take in the future. If we would like to begin the process of claiming some ethical behavior in the digital age, we're going to have to turn down some stuff. Because remember, when somebody online gives you something free, you're the product. Everything about you is available to them pretty much. You're the product. Don't ever forget that. Just because I can doesn't mean that I should. So when I was faced with this very same issue that person was in that cafe, I said, I don't care how sexy your app is, I'm not going to give you that access. And I didn't, and I still haven't. Even though that app is just as sexy and awesome as it ever was. I didn't download it. I didn't want to let them have it. And now, I'm not going to say I've never done that, but I'm telling you now, I read the privacy policy. I find out whether they're going to have access to things I don't want them to have, that they don't deserve to have, they don't need to have. There's no reason for an app maker of this capability to have access to your contacts. There's probably no connection, but if they say they're going to come get it, and you say, okay, they're going to come get it. Why is trust, back to trust, I talked about this earlier, why is trust even more valuable in the digital age? Well, you know what that thing there in the middle is, don't you? Right, that's the DNA helix. That represents you and me. We're analog humans. We're always going to be analog humans. We're never going to not be analog humans. The more we spend time in the digital age, our world is going to become more digital and less analog. You and I will not become more digital, and we're not going to become less analog. We're going to be the same analog beings we've always been. Even though our world is becoming, hell-bent for light speed, more digital. You and I, write this down, this is going to be the test. Analog humans will always require trust. That's not going to change. The question is, how do we, remember what I said earlier, how do we do that? How do we mount trust on a 9 gigahertz nitrogen-cooled 28-core processor? Well, we've got to find a way to do that. Because if we don't, there's going to come a day when there's going to be a big problem when you and I are becoming more digital and we're not comfortable with the ethics that's part of that. So how do we make trust immutable in the digital age? Well, I say in my book that it's the third ingredient. Digital fear, digital greed. In order to prevent fear and greed from breaching equilibrium, we created analog ethics, which are the passive forces, the ethics that we have, right? We created those things to push fear and greed back into equilibrium. Digital fear and greed doesn't work that way. It doesn't respond to passive ethics. So we're going to have to create something else. I call it the third ingredient. That's what I talk about in my book. And so the third ingredient is something that preempts digital fear and greed before it breaches equilibrium in a way that could possibly be even existential. Because when equilibrium is breached by the digital world, you got a big problem. You can't always put that Humpty Dumpty back together again. This is what I talk about in the book. I hope this has helped. I'm trying to give you some ideas. The book is a collection of stories, episodes, I call them. There are 8 episodes in the book, and they span 10,000 years. And the people who've been reading it have gotten back with me and said that they really like it, which makes me very happy. I think you'll like it. And Kelly said, if you take the little quiz, the little survey, we're going to give a signed book away. I'll give them. How about let's give away 3 or 4 books? I don't care. Let's give some books away, and I'll autograph them to you. If I know who you are, I'll autograph them to you. And I promise you, when you sell the book on eBay, my signature on it will affect the price, but I can't promise you which way. So thank you. I've enjoyed being with you today, and I'll sign off with 00. And you have to read the book to find out what that means. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed being with you. I'm ready for questions.
Awesome. That was a great explanation for your book. This is Elizabeth. I'm with the CSUB SBDC, and I'm the proud webinar producer here. And so Tom and I would like to ask you a couple questions. Tom, do you want to start with what you felt was a really important question?
Well, it'd be that third ingredient. Obviously, fear and greed has to be in equilibrium against fear and greed in the digital world. So what is that third ingredient? Did I miss it? Or did we...
Well, that's a spoiler alert. You don't want to do a spoiler alert, do you? The third ingredient is in the last episode. The third ingredient is in the last episode. But here's the thing. Here's what you have to remember. When you and I do something in the analog world that breaches trust, breaches ethics, we typically have had time to discover the problem. You come to me and say, "Hey, Jim, you messed up," and I say, "I'm sorry." I write a check, we bury the dead, and we recover from it. We move on. But if digital fear and greed breaches equilibrium, well, we see what happens when Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica thing happened. What was it? 87 million people pushed a button on their smartphone, and over a period of just a few days, I guess, 87 million contacts were released into the ether. That's wow. You can't put that back in the bottle. So the third ingredient is some method. It's got to be something that we can all agree on, that's technical, because it's got to move fast. You and me promising while our technology is working overnight, we go to bed, our technology is still working. Who's doing the ethical thing there with the technology now the way we used to? We used to always, whenever we worked, we were nearby our technology. So a human was nearby to apply the ethics. It's not like that anymore. We've got to come up with a method. And I talk about that in the book. I come up with my idea about what it is. And it is, I will tell you this, it is a piece of technology, and it is technology that some people have probably heard of. At least that's the idea that I have. That's all you're going to get out of me.
Okay, well, I did read the book, so I had lots of questions about that end too, and yet I will not reveal. Maybe more importantly, we should tell our audience, how do we react at this point? What is it that we can do as individuals, I guess, to convert our analog ethics to a digital ethics? Is it really like one person at a time, or is it going to require some world council to get together and we all make agreements together?
Yes. It's going to require both of those. It's going to require grassroots. Remember what I said, just because I can doesn't mean that I should. We're all going to have to start turning things away. All right, so I've got a map application on my smartphone, and it has to have access to my location if it's going to help me, right? So I don't mind. So I read the privacy policy of my map application, my map app, and it said, okay, if you give me access, I'm going to know where you are. You'll have to turn on the GPS. I'm going to know where you are, so I'll have to have that access. But it didn't say it was going to go get all my other stuff, my contacts, my gallery, my pics, all that. It didn't say that. So I'm trusting them not to do that. So I downloaded my app, my map application. But the other one I was telling you about, it had nothing to do with my photos or my contact. I shouldn't say my contacts. It was a photo editing app. It had nothing to do with my contacts. It didn't need my contacts to work, but yet it said, if you download this app, we're going to come get your contacts. Now that, in my opinion, is an unethical thing to do. And I told them, no, you've got to read these product privacy policies. We've got to turn them away. We've got to make sure that we see, remember, most people most people in the digital world who are developing these things have not even thought about ethics because they haven't had to. And you and I don't think about it because we've been doing it for 10,000 years. But what we have to do now, we have to think about ethics, analog and digital. For the first time in maybe our lives, every day of our lives, we have to think about ethical concepts. And it's incumbent upon every one of us to do that. And then hopefully it will roll up to some kind of a global standards type of thing. I would like to see that. And by the way, let me say this real quick. Let me say this real quick. That's not okay, there actually is a Congress like that. There's an organization. You familiar with ICANN, International a consortium of assigned names and numbers that manages all the URLs and everything? They're a global consortium. It's working right now. They've come up with standards. So there's already a model for that that's already created. We could use that model and we could make that happen. And let me tell you something, one more thing, two things. The Europeans are way ahead of us on this. And California is doing something very similar right now to what Europeans are doing with regard to privacy. So you guys are already getting a jump on things. You've always been a bellwether.
Well, I told you, Jim, when we started our conversation before we went on live here, when I read the book, I felt fearful. I know I've been swindled in the analog world, being an ethical guy, what's the word? In analog terms, obviously. Yeah. And absolutely it frightens me to think in terms of what could happen when people can just push buttons and impact the lives of billions of people around the globe. And that's why I think the fact that you were really ahead of the curve, because I know you wrote this book before there were any announcements from Facebook that they were doing unethical things and commercially benefiting from our private information. And who would have thought? Who would have thought? And so here it is, and it can get even bigger. As you say, we absolutely transform ourselves into a totally digital world, whatever that's going to look like. And I might add in the book for people, you do talk about the future. You have some incredibly vivid descriptions and explanations about what's going to happen in the future. I just love that classroom thing that you talked about. But I have to tell you that that Jericho just resonated like crazy with me because, oh, well, how did he know that? And I didn't even read that in the Bible. There was so much detail about those nomads coming to that man's land and then obviously asking for the wheat that he could create That's the first episode he's talking about, folks. And by the way, there are 4 episodes in the history, in the past, and there are 4 episodes in the future.
Yes.
I think we have a real question, do we not, from our audience? We haven't.
So we do. We just got a question in that I think is a great way to address this is what's the best way to protect our customers and offer them trust and assurance when I'm ad-libbing while we're operating business online.
Yeah, this is a really important point. Every day that goes by, small businesses are coming closer to using artificial intelligence and to using AI in their work. Most small business owners don't, but it's going to become, as we move more and more into the digital age, they're going to be increasing apps and interfaces that are going to give this kind of digital leverage, which is what AI is. The algorithms, artificial intelligence, robots, whatever, that's all digital leverage. That's going to become more and more in the domain of small businesses. And you're going to have the ability to apply some of that leverage in a way where you can say, no, that is not my business. That's not what even though I'd like to have that, I'm nosy. I'd like to know that about them. That's not part of my purview here. That's not part of what I'm trying to accomplish for them. So I'm going to hold my ability to impose on them, to penetrate their world, even though I could, and they might even give me permission. I'm not only going to not do it, I'm going to tell them I'm not going to do it. Now that's a way for you to do two things: for you to be a digitally ethical person and for you to be a digital ethical leader. And I'm telling you, you can turn that into business, because remember, humans will always require trust. And I'll tell you something else. If you have an opportunity, don't do business with people. Hold them to a standard. 0-0. I signed off with 0-0. I'd like for you to, I hope you get to the point in the book where you can read that, because that's something that we'll say to each other. Tom, when I walk up to you one day, we'll shake hands and we'll say 0-0 to each other, and that'll mean something to us. That'll mean that we're both digitally ethical people.
And I did enjoy that in the book too, and I love that. It wasn't.
Did I answer the question, you think?
Yeah, and I see the parallels with your previous book that we did a webinar on, the age of the customer, where when you go into, well, when we had the conversation about the type of customers you're looking for, and the issue was, well, they congregate in communities, and again, in the digital world. And when they're there, there has to be a way that you can go join them, but in a way that adds value. And it isn't just value of your product or service, but what I love, because I hadn't heard it for a long time, is that the company themselves had to have values. So I find this nice connection with your new book. It is values, it is ethics, it is about trust. And I love this, the last question we got from one of our audience participants, because they're showing that they're concerned about it. And that's what you were saying earlier. If we're not all addressing it and conscious of it, then we're going to be in dire straits in the future.
I hope people will not feel like they don't have any power. You've got more power than you know. I just hope that you'll take a little more time, start being a little more discerning user of digital leverage, and whenever you can, apply your influence on it in an ethical way.
I sense that through the book too. Like I told you initially, I was saying I was feeling like, oh my gosh, how can I as one individual do anything about that? This is way bigger than all of us, but that is the point. It's so bigger than all of us. All of us have to be a participant and a piece of it to make it all work in the long run, and not to just assume it'll take care of itself.
Well, remember this. Machines didn't create themselves. Machines don't run themselves. Machines don't turn themselves on. A human has to do that. So a human will have to govern the machines more than, and just in ways that we've never had to do before.
Well, that fits right into a great question that, you say that humans are more likely to take ourselves down hundreds of years before robots, can control humanity, because you hear the doomsdayers saying, "Oh my gosh, the robots are going to be killing humans in the streets." I like what you just said. If you're going to add to that, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. No, the robots aren't our biggest danger. We're our biggest danger. You know, Pogo. Remember what the possum philosopher Pogo said? "I've seen the enemy, and he is us." We're the problem, because we have look at this magic wand you've got in your hand, your smartphone. Look at the power you have in that phone. Let me give you an example. Remember the Facebook Cambridge Analytica thing? What if one of those people who downloaded that professor's app onto his phone was the regional service manager for pacemakers in the eastern half of the United States? And somehow that person had the contact information of all the people with pacemakers in the Eastern United States. And when he pushed that button and downloaded that app without realizing it or paying attention or caring maybe, all those people's contact information about their pacemaker went to this guy in Cambridge, in England, then to Cambridge Analytica, then to the dark web, and 30 days later, all those people are being given ransomware so they don't turn off their pacemakers. That sounds far-fetched, but I'm telling you, folks, we're one push of an enter key away from people having that kind of access to information. Those people are one button push away from giving that information to somebody else. And remember, we're not being hacked here. This isn't being hacked. That's another story. That's a whole other thing. This is us doing it, giving it to them.
I think that's a very powerful message to remind ourselves, and it's just so relevant, because I know I see these apps and I'm concerned with what kind of information we're willing to give up.
Well, that's why it's a good idea to read the book, obviously, because the question still remains then, will we actually ever be able to achieve digital trust? And I think, Jim, not only have you brought the topic to our attention, number one, but now people can start ruminating on how do we resolve this, and we can do it one person at a time. So what's your next book? Does it take off from this theme, or does it take off from any of your previous books, or is it a brand new venture?
You're killing me. I'm just catching my breath. I published 2 books in 4 years. That's like climbing Mount Everest and K2 at the same time.
You're very prolific, but we love your work.
I've got some other things on my mind, but basically, this book is, believe it or not, this book is going to have a lot of life and legs. This book's going to be around for a long time. It's got there are a lot of people that need to see this book. And folks, I mean, I would love to give this book to everybody, because I think it's that important, even though it's mine. Forgive the egotism, but I really do believe that I talk about some things in the book that I'm being told by other people that nobody else is talking about it. So I hope people will read it and buy one and share it with people. You know, tell them, don't buy it. Here, share my book. I don't care. I just want people to read the book. It'll help them.
And I might add, for everybody that hasn't read the book either, I found it very interesting. There was something that you mentioned that's already started in our world today, and that will actually replace trust. I like the way that was phrased, and that was kind of interesting. So they need to read that.
Well, that's a very controversial thought there, because a lot of people don't, and I don't like it when they say that the new technology like blockchain is going to replace trust. I don't like that thinking, because trust is never going to be replaced. It's just going to be.
That was my reference.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be put on a trust is going to have to be put on the technology in a way that we can all agree to. But the technology is going to change the way we apply trust, and it'll have to, because of the speed of everything. But that thing, right, what you just said about whether blockchain is going to be the replacement for trust, or I've actually had people say it's going to be the end of trust. I don't like that, because trust is always going to be there. Humans are always going to require trust. They're just going to start requiring it in another version, another fashion, another application, another way of thinking about it.
I love that clarification. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you so much, Jim. And we're going to send out some more details on how you can win Jim's book. So we're going to do the survey. We're going to have some random
How many are
drawings.
you going to give away, Elizabeth? How many do you want to give away?
Oh, you know, like it's up to you.
Let's give away 5. How about that?
Nice. Oh,
That'll,
generous.
that'll be fantastic. So I'll send out some. Exactly. And he delivers. We had rave reviews from our recipients from our last book giveaway. And we thank you so much for joining us and bringing up this really important topic. And we've had some great comments along with the questions on how this is very important. And this is privacy can be a luxury nowadays in the digital age. And so
We've had a
Well,
lot
I'm proud of
conversations
you
among
guys,
ourselves.
Kelly and Tom and Elizabeth. I'm really proud of the work you guys are doing. I love SBDCs, as I said. I'm so proud of you guys. You are the unsung heroes of the marketplace. You do important work, and you certainly don't do it for the money. I'm proud of you guys. Keep up the good work.
thank you so much, Jim. And
We love his provocative ideas because it keeps us in nice conversations here all the time. And this is a great one. We're going to have to work on this, aren't we?
yeah,
We're going to create that trust in the digital age.
exactly. But we're going to sign off here from Webinar Central. And I know Jim's got plenty more work to do, get some more provocative ideas out there. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you, everyone. And from Webinar Central, also known as Mid-State's beautiful conference room, downtown Bakersfield, we will see you next time.
Thank you, Jim. And thank you, everyone, for participating.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.